What would you do if one accidental notification exposed a family secret that had been hidden from you for years? Imagine sitting alone in a quiet hotel room, hundreds of miles away from home, only to discover that every Christmas, every celebration, every family gathering had been carefully planned without you. Not because they forgot, but because they wanted you gone. The most painful part wasn't the lies. It wasn't the fake excuses. It wasn't even being left out. The most painful part was realizing that the people who smiled in your face had been laughing behind your back the entire time. Before this story begins, tell me something. Which country are you watching from today? I'd love to know, so leave it in the comments. And if you enjoy powerful family stories filled with unexpected twists, consider subscribing because every story here reminds us that the truth always finds its way into the light. My name is Claire Bennett, and I'm 34 years old. For almost 10 years, I've worked as a structural engineer, which means I spend more time in hotels than I do in my own apartment. Bridges, parking structures, hospitals. If a building needs someone to make sure it can safely carry weight, that's where I usually end up. Most people think it's an exciting career. The truth? It's lonely. You eat dinner alone. You spend holidays in hotel rooms. You tell yourself that sacrificing time with family is worth it because one day they'll appreciate everything you've done. At least, that's what I believed. 3 weeks before Christmas, I was staying in a small hotel outside Cincinnati while supervising a bridge renovation project. My days started before sunrise and usually ended long after dark. Every evening looked exactly the same. Takeout food. Laptop open. Construction reports spread across the desk. A television playing quietly in the background that I barely watched. That Tuesday evening felt no different. Around 9 o'clock, while reviewing inspection notes, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I ignored it. A few seconds later, it buzzed again. Then again. Finally, I reached over, expecting another email from work. Instead, I froze. Someone had added me to a family group chat. That alone felt strange. My family had never created group chats that included me. The title read, Christmas Tree Family Christmas Planning Christmas Tree. Beneath it waited 47 unread messages. Before I even opened the conversation, another notification appeared. It was a private message from my younger sister, Emily. Oops, wrong chat. Just ignore it, face with tears of joy. Wrong chat? My stomach tightened. People don't accidentally add someone to a conversation they were never supposed to see. Without replying, I opened the messages. The first few looked completely normal. Ryan, my older brother, asked everyone if Christmas morning at 10 worked for them. Mom replied that she'd polished the good china. Dad joked about finally getting everyone together. Emily talked about desserts. It looked exactly like every happy family conversation you'd expect. Then, everything changed. Mom wrote one sentence. Make sure Claire doesn't find out. I stopped scrolling. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it. Maybe she meant something else. Maybe there was another surprise they didn't want spoiled. Then Ryan replied, just tell her the wrong date again like last year. Dad didn't type a single word. He simply reacted with a laughing emoji. I couldn't breathe. Last year, I remembered exactly what had happened last year. I'd spent almost 6 hours driving home after finishing a project. I baked Grandma's favorite potato casserole, bought presents for everyone, wrapped every single gift myself. When I reached my parents' house, the driveway was empty. No cars, no music, no lights. I stood on the porch carrying food that was still warm. Confused, I called Mom. She answered after several rings. Oh, honey, didn't anyone tell you? We ended up celebrating on Christmas Day instead. It was all very last minute. I remember forcing myself to smile even though no one could see me. That's okay, I had said. My mistake. I apologized. To them. Standing alone on a freezing front porch. Tonight, 47 messages proved that nothing about that day had been last minute. It had all been planned. Every single detail. I kept scrolling. The conversation became even worse. No one asked whether I would feel hurt. No one wondered if they should invite me. Instead, they discussed how to make sure I stayed away. Emily asked, what if she somehow finds out? Mom answered almost immediately. She won't. She never does. Those 5 words hurt more than anything else. She won't. She never does. Not because they were cruel, but because they were confident. They'd done this before. More than once. I suddenly started remembering birthdays I'd somehow missed. Family dinners I only heard about weeks later. Photos posted online after everyone had already gone home. Every time I convinced myself people were simply busy. Every time I blamed my work schedule. Every time I thought, maybe next year will be different. No, they hadn't forgotten me. They'd organized their lives around excluding me. Slowly, I began taking screenshots. Every conversation, every message, every laughing emoji. Not because I planned to confront anyone. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I needed proof. Proof that I wasn't imagining what I was reading. For years, I defended them. I told friends my family loved me. I told coworkers holiday schedules were confusing. I told myself that distance made relationships difficult. But screenshots don't lie. Then, one message near the bottom stopped me cold. Ryan wrote, "Closing is on the 26th. Just keep Claire away until then." Closing? I frowned. Closing on what? 2 messages later, Mom replied. The realtor confirmed the buyers want the final walkthrough on Christmas afternoon. A realtor. A buyer. A closing date. My pulse quickened. Only one property made sense. My grandmother Eleanor's house. The old yellow home with the wraparound porch. The only place where I had ever felt completely accepted. The place where I spent summers studying while Grandma made coffee before sunrise. The place where she always said, "No matter what happens, you'll always have a home here." Could they really be selling it? Without telling me? I stared through the hotel window as snow quietly covered the parking lot outside. For the first time in my life, I wasn't questioning whether my family loved me. I already knew the answer. The only question left was far more frightening. What exactly were they hiding? And why were they so desperate to keep me away until Christmas was over? When people betray you once, it hurts. When they betray you for years, it changes the way you see every memory you've ever trusted. As I sat alone in that quiet hotel room, staring at those 47 messages, I realized something that made my heart sink. My family hadn't simply forgotten to invite me. They had become experts at making me feel like I never belonged. If you've ever been treated like the outsider in your own family, you're not alone. Share your thoughts in the comments because stories like this remind us that sometimes strangers understand our pain better than relatives do. And if you're enjoying this journey, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another unforgettable story. I couldn't stop reading. Every message seemed to answer one question while creating 10 more. The more I scrolled, the more carefully I examined every sentence. As an engineer, details are my job. One small crack can bring down an entire bridge. One missing bolt can turn a safe structure into a disaster. And right now, my family's lives were beginning to look exactly like that. Hidden cracks, tiny details, small mistakes, until one accidental notification exposed the whole structure. I opened the chat again from the very beginning. This time I wasn't reading like a daughter. I was reading like an investigator. Ryan mentioned the closing date. Mom mentioned the realtor. Emily worried I might discover something. Dad laughed instead of asking questions. None of them sounded nervous. They sounded confident. Almost too confident. That bothered me. People only become that confident when they've already convinced themselves they'll never get caught. I slowly placed my phone on the desk, then picked it back up and continued taking screenshots. Every conversation, every message, every timestamp. I even saved Emily's private message telling me to ignore the chat. If anyone ever tried to deny what happened, I'd have proof. For several minutes, I simply stared at the wall. My mind kept drifting back to my grandmother, Eleanor Bennett. Everyone called her Grandma Ellie. To me, she was home. Whenever my parents were too busy with Ryan's baseball tournaments or Emily's dance competitions, Grandma always had time. She never made me feel like an interruption. She listened. She asked about school. She remembered little things everyone else forgot. When I was 19 and couldn't afford college housing one summer, she opened her front door without hesitation. "Stay as long as you need," she'd said. "A home isn't measured by how long you stay. It's measured by whether you're welcome when you arrive." I never forgot those words. Even now, years after losing her, I could still smell fresh cinnamon rolls drifting through her kitchen every Sunday morning. I could still picture her sitting on the porch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders while reading mystery novels. That house held every peaceful memory I'd ever had. The thought of strangers living there made my chest tighten. But another thought frightened me even more. If they were selling Grandma's house, why hadn't anyone mentioned it? When Grandma passed away 3 years earlier, My mother told everyone the legal paperwork had already been handled. I believed her. No one asked for my signature. No lawyer contacted me. No one discussed an inheritance. Nothing. At the time, I assumed Grandma had simply left everything to Mom. I never questioned it. Now, I wasn't so sure. I opened my laptop and searched for the county property records. The government website loaded painfully slowly. While I waited, I reached into my work bag looking for my phone charger. Instead, my fingers touched something cold. Metal. I pulled it out. Grandma's old brass key. I'd carried it on my keyring for almost 9 years. Most people would have thrown away an old house key after the owner passed away. I never could. It wasn't just a key. It was a promise. The day Grandma handed it to me was still crystal clear in my memory. It happened during Thanksgiving dinner. Everyone else was watching football in the living room. Grandma quietly called me into the hallway. Without saying much, she placed the heavy brass key into my hand. "Keep this," she whispered. "No matter where life takes you, this house will always be yours too." I smiled and hugged her. At the time, I thought she was simply being sentimental. Mom had rolled her eyes. Ryan barely looked up from his phone. Dad nodded politely before turning back toward the television. No one treated the moment as important. Neither did I. Until tonight, the county website finally loaded. I entered Grandma's address. The search wheel spun. Seconds felt like minutes. Finally, a list of property documents appeared on the screen. Old purchase records. Mortgage paperwork. Tax filings. Then, one document caught my attention. Quitclaim deed. Recorded. 8 years earlier. My heartbeat instantly quickened. Why would Grandma transfer ownership while she was still alive? I clicked the file. The scanned document slowly appeared on the screen. The image was blurry. Slightly crooked. Typical government paperwork. I leaned closer. The first line listed Grandma as the owner. The second line listed the new owners. The first name, Diane Bennett. My mother. That wasn't surprising. Then my eyes dropped to the next line. For several seconds, I couldn't even breathe. Because the second name wasn't Ryan. It wasn't Emily. It wasn't Dad. It was mine. Claire Elizabeth Bennett. I blinked. Then read it again. And again. The document clearly stated that my mother and I owned the property together. Not emotionally. Not verbally. Legally. Recorded. Filed. Stamped. Signed. 8 years ago. Grandma hadn't simply given me a key. She had quietly given me something far more powerful. Half ownership of the only place my family was desperately trying to sell. Suddenly everything made sense. The fake Christmas dates. The secret group chat. The mysterious buyer. The closing on December 26th. They weren't just keeping me away from Christmas. They were trying to keep me away from the truth. And for the first time that night, I realized something they hadn't. They could lie to me. They could exclude me. They could laugh at me. But there was one thing they could never do. They couldn't legally sell that house without me. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glowing computer screen. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, everything had changed. Not because I finally understood what they were hiding, but because I had just discovered the one thing they never expected me to find. And from that moment forward, the game was no longer theirs to control. The moment I saw my name on that property deed, everything inside me changed. For years, I had questioned myself. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe my family really had been busy. Maybe work had kept me away too often. But one legal document erased every excuse I had ever made for them. This was no misunderstanding. This was a plan. And somehow, my grandmother had seen it coming years before anyone else did. I couldn't stop staring at the computer screen. The county website displayed the document as plainly as if it had been waiting for me all these years. Grantor, Eleanor Bennett. Grantees, Diane Bennett and Claire Elizabeth Bennett. The filing date was 8 years old. The notary stamp was perfectly clear. There was no mistake. No typo. No confusion. I slowly leaned back in my chair and covered my mouth with one hand. For almost 10 minutes, I simply sat there without moving. Outside my hotel window, snow continued falling across the empty parking lot. Inside, my entire childhood suddenly looked different. I picked up Grandma's old brass key from the desk. Its edges were worn smooth from years of use. For almost a decade, I had carried it everywhere without really understanding why I could never throw it away. Now, I finally understood. It had never been just a house key. It was a reminder that someone in my family had believed I belonged. Someone had quietly protected my future long before anyone else tried to erase me from it. Tears filled my eyes. Not because of the money, not because of the house, but because Grandma had believed in me when almost no one else ever had. I closed my eyes and remembered one afternoon from years earlier. Grandma and I were sitting on her wraparound porch during late summer. She handed me a glass of homemade lemonade and smiled. "Claire," she said softly, "people will always show you who they are. Sometimes it takes years, but they always do. When that day comes, don't argue with them. Believe what they showed you." Back then, I laughed. I thought she was simply giving another piece of grandmotherly advice. Tonight, those words echoed inside my head. She already knew. Maybe not every detail. Maybe she couldn't predict this exact situation. But she understood something about our family that I hadn't been ready to accept. She knew I would someday need protection. And instead of fighting with anyone, she handled it quietly, legally, the way only Grandma could. I opened every document connected to the property. There were tax records, mortgage releases, maintenance filings. Everything looked completely ordinary, until I reached the ownership history. There had never been another transfer after Grandma added my name. No sale, no new deed, no paperwork removing me. Legally, nothing had changed. I still owned half the property. I whispered the words aloud. Half the house. It didn't even sound real. Then another thought hit me. If I still owned half, how were they planning to sell everything? Were they hoping I would sign paperwork without reading it? Or did they think I didn't even know I was listed as an owner? The second possibility made far more sense. After all, I'd never questioned them before. Why would they think this time would be any different? I looked back at the screenshots from the family group chat. Ryan's message stood out more than ever. Closing is on the 26th. Just keep Claire away until then. Until then. Not forever. Just until the sale was finished. That meant they expected something from me before closing. A signature. An approval. Or maybe nothing at all. Maybe they honestly believed the sale could happen without me knowing. Either way, they had underestimated one important thing. They underestimated Grandma. I spent the next hour researching property ownership laws. Most websites said exactly the same thing. When two people legally own property together, one owner cannot simply sell the other person's share. Every owner must agree. Every required signature must be verified. Every document must match public records. As I continued reading, something inside me slowly calmed down. For the first time that night, I wasn't panicking anymore. I wasn't crying anymore. I was thinking the way I always did at work. Step by step. Problem. Evidence. Solution. My family had emotion. I had facts. Facts don't panic. Facts don't lie. Facts don't disappear because someone wishes they would. The hotel room suddenly felt much smaller that I stood up and began walking in circles. Then I stopped beside the window. Across the street, families were shopping for Christmas decorations. Children laughed while carrying colorful gift bags. Cars passed with Christmas music playing through open windows. Life outside looked so warm, so normal. Meanwhile, I was discovering that my own family had been living a double life. I wondered how many holidays had been fake. How many birthday dinners I'd never been invited to. How many family photos existed without me standing in them. How many times they had smiled together while I sat alone believing work had simply kept us apart. The answer hurt more than I wanted to admit. Probably more than I would ever know. Around midnight, my phone rang. The screen showed one name. Mom. For several seconds, I simply watched it ring. She had no idea I had seen the messages. She had no idea I had found the deed. She had no idea her entire plan was already falling apart. The call stopped, then started again. This time, I answered, trying to sound completely normal. Hi, Mom. Her voice was warm. Almost too warm. Hi, sweetheart. I just wanted to check on you. How's work going? Exactly the same caring tone she'd always used. The same tone I had trusted my entire life. We talked about work for a minute. The weather. Traffic. Nothing important. Then, she finally said the sentence I had been expecting. We're keeping Christmas really small this year. I stayed quiet. She continued. You'll probably be busy anyway, but if you're free on the 28th, come by for leftovers. We'd love to see you. The 28th. The exact date written in the group chat. Word for word. My heart didn't race anymore. Instead, I felt something colder. Disappointment. Because now I knew she wasn't improvising. She was following a script. I looked at my laptop screen. The screenshots were still open beside the property deed, both telling the exact same story. I forced a small smile she couldn't see. "That sounds nice, Mom. I'll check my schedule." "Wonderful," she replied cheerfully. "Don't worry about bringing anything. Just come if you can." After hanging up, I slowly placed the phone back on the desk. Then I looked once more at Grandma's brass key. My mother thought I still knew nothing. She believed I was exactly where she wanted me. Far away, completely unaware. But for the first time in years, the advantage had quietly shifted. Because while my family was busy planning Christmas, I had already started planning something they never saw coming. Sometimes the strongest revenge isn't shouting. It isn't exposing people on social media. It isn't even arguing. Sometimes, the strongest move is staying completely silent while everyone else keeps making mistakes. That night, after my mother's phone call ended, I sat alone in my hotel room staring at Grandma Eleanor's brass key lying beside my laptop. For years, I believed I had lost the only person who truly understood me. Now I realized, she had left me something far more valuable than memories. She had left me protection. If you've ever had someone believe in you when nobody else did, tell me about them in the comments. They deserve to be remembered. And if you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to subscribe because the biggest twists are still ahead. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the same thoughts kept repeating. The fake Christmas invitations, the family group chat, the deed, the realtor, the closing date. Everything fit together like pieces of a puzzle. Around 6 the next morning, I got dressed, grabbed a coffee from the hotel lobby, and returned to my room with only one goal. Find the truth. Not my family's version. The legal version. The version written on paper. I opened my laptop again and downloaded every document connected to Grandma Eleanor's property. Then I created a folder on my desktop for 12 Maple Avenue. Inside it, I saved everything. The deed, the property history, the screenshots from the family chat, Emily's message telling me to ignore the conversation, even my mother's call log from the night before. At work, documentation solves arguments. People can deny conversations. They can't deny evidence. I wasn't collecting proof for revenge. I was collecting facts. Because facts don't change depending on who tells the story. That afternoon, while inspecting concrete supports at the bridge site, my phone rang again. Emily. I answered after a few seconds. She sounded unusually nervous. "Hey, Claire, just wanted to see how you're doing." It felt strange. She rarely called unless Mom asked her to. We talked about work for a minute. Then she casually mentioned Ryan. "He's been really stressed lately." I stayed quiet. She continued. "The repair shop isn't doing very well." That caught my attention. Ryan owned an auto repair business about 40 minutes from our hometown. I remembered Mom proudly talking about it when he first opened. She had even helped him get the business loan. "How bad is it?" I asked. Emily hesitated. "Pretty bad. The bank's been sending notices." Mom's worried because she co-signed the loan. There it was. The missing piece. I thanked her for calling, wished her a good evening, and ended the conversation. Then I sat perfectly still. Ryan's business was failing. Mom was financially responsible. Grandma's house had no mortgage. The realtor had already found a buyer. The closing was scheduled for December 26th. Suddenly, everything made perfect sense. This wasn't just about excluding me from Christmas. They needed money. Fast. Selling Grandma's house would solve Ryan's financial disaster. But there was one problem. Me. Not because they cared about my feelings. Because legally, I owned half the property. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was an obstacle. Back in my room, I opened the property listing online. The house appeared immediately. There it was. Grandma Eleanor's beautiful yellow home. Only, it didn't look like Grandma's house anymore. The porch furniture had been replaced. Fresh white paint covered the kitchen walls. The old rocking chair where Grandma used to drink coffee every morning was gone. The family photographs had disappeared. Even the living room looked unfamiliar. Professional staging. Neutral furniture. Perfect lighting. Everything looked beautiful. Everything looked empty. It felt like someone had erased every memory that ever lived there. I clicked through every photograph. The upstairs bedroom where I had spent countless summers studying. Empty. The backyard where Grandma planted roses every spring. Landscaped for buyers. The dining room where we baked Christmas cookies together. Decorated by strangers. I quietly whispered, They started saying goodbye long before they ever told me. For the first time, I wasn't angry. I was heartbroken. That evening, I made a decision. I wasn't going to call my mother. I wasn't going to accuse anyone. I wasn't going to send the screenshots. Because I already knew exactly how that conversation would end. Mom would cry. Ryan would get angry. Dad would stay silent. Emily would ask everyone to calm down. Then somehow, I'd end up apologizing. Just like always. Not this time. This time, I wanted the truth to come from someone they couldn't manipulate. The next morning, before leaving for the construction site, I searched for a real estate attorney in Columbus. After reading several reviews, I scheduled a consultation. The attorney listened carefully while I explained everything. The family group chat, the property deed, the scheduled closing, the buyer. When I finished speaking, he leaned back in his chair. "Ms. Bennett," he said calmly, "based on everything you've shown me, that property cannot legally be sold without your knowledge and your written consent." I nodded slowly. "Even if my mother owns half?" "Yes." He pointed toward the deed. "Your ownership is recorded with the county. Any competent title company will discover your name during the title search. And if they try to close anyway?" He smiled politely. "The sale stops immediately." Those 4 words echoed inside my head. "The sale stops immediately." He continued. "If they want to force a sale without your agreement, they'll likely need court involvement. That process takes months, sometimes longer. Months. Exactly what Ryan couldn't afford. Exactly what Mom feared." I thanked the attorney and paid for the consultation. Before leaving, he said one final sentence. One sentence I wrote in my notebook the moment I reached my car. "Your signature isn't just paperwork. It's the foundation of the entire transaction." Foundation. As an engineer, that word meant everything. Remove the foundation, the entire structure collapses. I looked down at Grandma Eleanor's brass key resting beside my notebook. Then I smiled for the first time since discovering the family chat. Not because I wanted revenge, because I finally understood something my grandmother had known years earlier. She never expected me to fight my family with anger. She expected me to protect myself with the truth. And that was exactly what I was about to do. For years, I believed staying quiet was the only way to keep my family together. I stayed silent when they forgot my birthday. I stayed silent when they celebrated holidays without me. I stayed silent when they always made me feel like an afterthought. But silence has a limit. And sometimes, the moment you stop protecting people who never protected you, your entire life changes. 2 days passed after my meeting with the attorney. During those 48 hours, I didn't call anyone. I didn't send angry texts. I didn't post anything online. I simply went to work every morning, inspected bridge supports, attended meetings, and returned to my hotel room each evening. From the outside, nothing about my life had changed. Inside, everything had. Every night before going to sleep, I reopened the folder on my laptop. The screenshots, the deed, the property records, the call log. Every document reminded me that I wasn't imagining any of this. The truth was sitting right in front of me. I just needed to decide how to use it. On the evening of December 15th, I opened my laptop and searched for the realtor handling Grandma Eleanor's house. It didn't take long. The listing displayed the agent's name, Karen Whitmore. There was a phone number, an office email, and several glowing reviews praising her professionalism. I stared at the contact information for nearly 5 minutes. Once I sent that email, there would be no turning back. I took a deep breath and began typing. Subject: ownership of 412 Maple Avenue. Dear Ms. Whitmore, my name is Claire Elizabeth Bennett. I recently discovered that the property located at 412 Maple Avenue is listed for sale through your office. According to the county records, I am a recorded co-owner of this property along with Diane Bennett. I have not been contacted regarding the pending transaction, nor have I been asked to approve or sign any documents related to the sale. Could you please confirm the current status of the transaction and explain how my ownership interest is being addressed? For your convenience, I have attached a copy of the recorded deed. Thank you for your time. Claire Bennett. I read the email 3 times, corrected 2 commas, checked the attachment twice. Then, I clicked send. For a few seconds, I simply stared at the screen. The email disappeared into my sent folder. There was nothing else to do. Now, the truth belonged to someone outside my family. The next morning, I was walking across the bridge construction site when my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, I ignored unknown calls. This time, I answered. Ms. Bennett. A calm female voice spoke. This is Karen Whitmore. I stepped away from the construction crew. Thank you for contacting me yesterday, she continued. I've reviewed the deed you attached. There was a brief pause. Then her tone became more serious. I need to verify several details with the title company before I can answer your questions. Of course, I replied. I'll call you back later today. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. But something in her voice told me she had already realized how serious the situation was. That afternoon, my phone rang again. Karen. This time, she got straight to the point. Ms. Bennett, I've spoken with the title company. I waited. The title report confirms that you are a legal co-owner of the property. I closed my eyes. Not because I was surprised, because hearing another professional confirm it made everything real. Karen continued carefully. As things currently stand, this transaction cannot move forward without your participation. Those words echoed exactly what the attorney had told me. Have the sellers discussed the sale with you? She asked. No. Have they requested your signature? No. I hesitated for a moment, then answered honestly. I discovered the sale by accident. Silence filled the line. Finally, Karen sighed quietly. I understand. Professional though she was, I could hear genuine concern in her voice. I'll need to notify both the title company and the sellers that there's an unresolved ownership issue. That's perfectly fine, I answered calmly. From this point forward, I'd prefer all communication regarding the property to go through proper legal channels. Absolutely. She thanked me. We ended the call. I slipped my phone back into my pocket. For the first time in weeks, I felt completely calm. Not because I'd won, because I no longer had to carry the truth alone. Someone else now knew exactly what was happening. 3 days later, an email arrived from my mother. No phone call. No explanation. Just an attachment. Estate Cleanup Documents.pdf. The subject line simply read, Claire, please sign these before Christmas. Just routine paperwork. Love you. Routine paperwork. Something about those words immediately felt wrong. I opened the attachment. The first page looked official. Legal language. Property descriptions. Signature boxes. I kept scrolling. Then, everything stopped. My own name appeared on page 4, highlighted with a bright yellow marker. Beside it, someone had written in blue ink, Sign here, Redheart. I didn't smile. I didn't panic. Instead, I started reading every single line, word by word, exactly the way my grandmother had taught me. Halfway through the document, my heart sank. This wasn't routine paperwork. This wasn't estate cleanup. This was the final property transfer. The document would transfer ownership of Grandma Eleanor's house to the buyer for $265,000. I turned to the payment section. My breathing slowed. Every dollar from the sale, every single dollar, was scheduled to be deposited into my mother's account. There was no payment listed for me. No percentage. No explanation. Nothing. They weren't asking me to sell my share. They were asking me to give it away. For free. Without even telling me what I was signing. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen in disbelief. Then I quietly closed the PDF, forwarded it directly to my attorney, saved another copy inside my evidence folder, and without writing a single reply, I closed my laptop. Outside, Christmas lights sparkled across the hotel parking lot. Inside, I realized something that hurt even more than the group chat ever had. My family hadn't just planned to leave me out of Christmas. They believed I trusted them enough to sign away the last gift my grandmother ever gave me, without reading a single word. There are moments in life when people expect you to scream. They expect you to argue. They expect you to cry, because that's the only version of you they've ever known. But sometimes, silence is far more powerful than anger. And on that Christmas morning, I didn't need a long speech. I only needed one sentence. Before this part begins, I want to ask you something. If someone treated you the way Claire's family treated her, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like this remind you to know your worth, don't forget to subscribe, because the ending of this journey is something you'll never forget. After forwarding the fake estate cleanup documents to my attorney, I never responded to my mother's email. Hours turned into days. Days turned into Christmas Eve. My family continued acting as if everything was going exactly according to plan. Meanwhile, my attorney confirmed that Karen, the realtor, had already informed the title company about my ownership. The buyer had also been notified that an ownership issue existed. The closing scheduled for December 26th was no longer guaranteed. Still, my family had no idea. Or maybe, they believed they could somehow convince me at the last moment. Either way, I refused to make the first move. On Christmas Eve, I drove back to my apartment in Columbus after finishing my bridge project 2 days earlier than expected. Walking into my apartment felt strangely peaceful. No drama. No lies. No fake smiles. I unpacked my suitcase, watered the plant sitting beside my kitchen window, and placed Grandma Eleanor's brass key on my desk. Beside it, I laid the manila folder containing every piece of evidence. The screenshots, the property deed, the fake estate paperwork, my attorney's notes, Karen's emails. Looking at that folder reminded me of something important. For years, I had been collecting memories. Now, I was collecting facts. And facts were stronger than excuses. Later that evening, curiosity got the better of me. I opened the family group chat one more time. The conversation was still active. Ryan wrote, "Everyone be here by 9:30 tomorrow." Emily replied with pictures of homemade pies. Dad sent a Santa Claus emoji. Then Mom wrote something that made my stomach tighten. "Remember, don't mention Claire. She still thinks Christmas is on the 28th. Several people reacted with laughing emojis. I stared at the screen for a long time. 3 years. 3 Christmases. 3 carefully planned lies. And somehow, none of them felt guilty. I quietly locked my phone. There was nothing left to discover. I already knew everything I needed to know. That night I barely slept. Not because I was nervous, because I kept thinking about Grandma. I imagined her sitting on that old porch swing with a warm blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She always believed problems should be solved calmly. "Never argue with people who already know they're wrong," she used to tell me. "Let the truth do the talking." For the first time, I understood exactly what she meant. Christmas morning arrived. I woke before sunrise, made myself a cup of coffee, sat at my kitchen table. Outside, children were opening presents. Families were gathering together. Inside my apartment, everything was completely quiet. At exactly 9:30 a.m., I opened the family group chat. Messages were already pouring in. "Merry Christmas. Breakfast is ready. Can't wait to see everyone." Mom uploaded a photo of the dining room. 4 plates. 4 chairs. 4 wine glasses. Once again, there was no place set for me. I wasn't surprised. Not anymore. I simply counted them. 4. Exactly as expected. At 9:48, I opened the draft message I had written nearly 2 weeks earlier. I had rewritten it dozens of times. At first it was emotional, then angry, then sarcastic. Eventually, I deleted everything. Only one sentence remained. Short, calm, impossible to argue with. I pressed send. "Merry Christmas. Your realtor will explain the rest." That was it. No accusations. No insults. No explanation. I placed my phone face up on the table, then quietly sipped my coffee. For almost 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then, the typing bubble appeared beneath Emily's name. It disappeared. Then Ryan started typing. Stopped. Mom started typing. Stopped. Nobody knew what to say, because my message didn't accuse anyone. It simply pointed them toward the one person who already had the legal truth. The silence lasted almost 5 minutes. Then, my phone exploded. Ryan called first. I watched it ring. Didn't answer. A few seconds later, he called again. Voicemail. Emily called. Then Dad. Then Mom. The screen barely stopped vibrating before another call arrived. Text messages followed immediately. "Claire, what does that mean? Call us immediately. What did you tell the realtor? Answer your phone." I calmly placed the phone back on the table. For years, they couldn't find 5 minutes to call me on Christmas. Today, they suddenly had all the time in the world. Being an engineer, numbers have always fascinated me. So instead of answering, I opened the Notes app. Every missed call became another number. Ryan, 7 calls. Emily, 5. Dad, 3. Mom, 14. The total kept climbing. Within less than an hour, the number reached 89 missed calls. 89. I looked at that number for several seconds. 3 years of silence. 1 sentence. 89 phone calls. Funny how quickly people remember your number when they suddenly need something from you. At exactly 11:15 a.m., my phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. I looked at Grandma Eleanor's brass key resting beside my coffee mug. Then I picked up the phone. Not because I owed anyone an explanation, but because, for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the conversation anymore. I pressed the green button. Before I could even say hello, my mother's trembling voice echoed through the speaker. "Claire, what have you done?" And the moment I heard those words, I knew their perfect Christmas had already fallen apart. There comes a moment when every lie reaches its limit. Every excuse falls apart. Every secret finds its way into the light. My family believed they had everything under control. They planned the holidays. They planned the sale. They even planned my absence. But they forgot one simple truth. No plan built on lies can survive forever. Before this story comes to an end, I want to ask you one last question. If you were in Claire's position, would you have forgiven your family? Let me know in the comments. And if stories like this remind you to value yourself, don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps this channel bring you more unforgettable stories. The moment I answered my mother's call, I could hear chaos in the background. Someone was crying. Someone was yelling. Plates clattered against the dining table. The peaceful Christmas morning they had planned had completely disappeared. My mother spoke first. "Claire, what did you do?" For a second, I almost laughed. Not because the situation was funny, because of the question itself. For years I had done everything they asked. Stayed quiet. Stayed patient. Stayed understanding. Today, for the very first time, I had done absolutely nothing. I calmly replied, "I didn't do anything, Mom." There was silence. Then Ryan's voice shouted from somewhere in the background. "Put her on speaker." A second later I heard the click. Now everyone could hear me. Perfect. I wanted them all to listen. I took a slow breath before speaking. I contacted the realtor after discovering that I'm legally listed as a co-owner of Grandma Eleanor's house. No one interrupted. I continued. The title company confirmed my ownership. The closing couldn't legally continue without my approval. Again, silence. Finally Ryan exploded. "You've ruined everything." His voice echoed through the phone. "You've destroyed this family." I answered quietly. "No, Ryan. I read the documents. You tried to sell a house I legally own. You sent me paperwork disguised as routine estate documents. And you expected me to sign it without reading." Nobody answered. Not one person. For years, I thought silence meant peace. Now I understood. Sometimes, silence is guilt. A few seconds later my mother tried changing her tone. The tears came. The same tears I had watched my entire life. "Claire, sweetheart, we were going to explain everything." I closed my eyes. "Really? When? Before the sale? Or after the money was already deposited into your account?" She didn't answer. Instead she whispered, "We would have shared it." I asked one simple question. "Then why did the paperwork show every dollar going into your account?" Again, nothing. No explanation. Because there wasn't one. Dad finally spoke. His voice sounded older than I remembered. "We shouldn't have handled it this way." 7 simple words. The first honest sentence anyone in my family had spoken since this nightmare began. But honesty, arriving years too late, doesn't erase betrayal. I gave my attorney's phone number to my mother. Then I calmly said, "From now on, every conversation about Grandma's house goes through legal channels." Ryan tried interrupting again. I didn't let him. "Merry Christmas." Then I ended the call. No shouting. No insults. No revenge. Just boundaries. For the first time in my life. Healthy boundaries. The next morning the scheduled closing never happened. The buyer withdrew from the purchase after learning the ownership dispute could delay everything for months. Within weeks, Ryan's repair shop officially defaulted on its bank loan. My mother, who had guaranteed that loan, became responsible for the remaining debt. For the first time, their decisions had consequences they couldn't blame on anyone else. 2 months later, my attorney arranged mediation. We met inside a conference room in Columbus. Mom, Dad, Ryan, me. Emily chose not to attend. She later admitted she couldn't face what had happened. The meeting lasted almost 4 hours. Mom cried. Ryan argued. Dad mostly stared at the table. Finally, the mediator asked me one question. What outcome are you seeking? I had already decided. I have only 2 options. We sell the property fairly and split the proceeds according to legal ownership. Or, I purchase my mother's share at the appraised value. Nothing else. No emotional speeches. No endless negotiations. Just facts. Ryan looked directly at me, then quietly said, "Grandma would have wanted us to keep the house in the family." I looked back at him. She did. My name has been on the deed for 8 years. The real question is, when did you stop considering me part of this family? Ryan lowered his eyes. He had no answer. Neither did anyone else. A month later, the house returned to the market. This time, everything happened legally. Every document was transparent. Every owner signed willingly. When the sale was completed, I received my rightful share. Just over $120,000. I deposited the money into a savings account. I never celebrated receiving it, because Grandma's house had never been about money. It had always been about love. Before the new owners moved in, I drove to the house one final time. The porch looked exactly as I remembered. The old maple tree still stood proudly in the front yard. Birds chirped from its branches. The wind carried the familiar smell of fresh grass. I unlocked the front door using Grandma Eleanor's brass key. It still fit perfectly. The house was empty. Fresh paint covered the walls. Every room echoed. I slowly walked from room to room. The kitchen where Grandma baked cinnamon rolls. The living room where she read mystery novels every evening. The upstairs bedroom where I studied during college summers. So many memories. None of them belonged to the furniture. They belonged to her. I stood quietly in the center of the living room, smiled, and whispered, "Thank you. Not for the money, not for the house, but for believing in me long before I learned to believe in myself." When I walked outside, I looked one last time at the porch. Then I removed the brass key from my keyring. I placed it gently on the wooden railing. Some memories are meant to stay where they were created. As I walked back to my car, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Because after spending years trying to earn a place in a family that never truly made room for me, I finally understood something Grandma had known all along. Your worth is never decided by the people who leave you out. It's decided by the courage you have to stop leaving yourself out. And that was the greatest gift she ever gave me. Take that as your sign. Set the boundary today. And if someone you love needs to hear this, share it with them. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.